Hello and welcome to tonight's live stream. My name is Randy Lubin. I'm here thanks to my incredibly generous Patreon backers. I just launched my Patreon last week to help me make really fun storytelling games. And I hit my first goal, which is $100 per game. And that means I'll be doing these regular live streams where I update you all on my design progress and answer any questions. And I'm really excited to make this a regular thing. So to start off, let's jump right into the current designs I'm working on. So the one that's by far furthest along is a game called Behind the Magic. Behind the Magic, the name's inspired by VH1's Behind the Music, and it is a mockumentary, specifically a fantasy mockumentary. So think a little bit Spinal Tap meets Lord of the Rings. You follow a group of highly incompetent adventurers as they bumble their way through a quest almost certainly to fail and leave the realm in ruin. This is a game that I've playtested 5 times now, including 3 times at Metatopia, and I'm very happy with how it's shaping up. It plays out, so it could be played around a table, but I think it really sings as a live action game where you're actually acting out embodied, walking around a room. It works well for 4 to 6 players. I ran it with 7 players once, and that needs a little tweaking. And it plays out in about an hour and a half of playtime, plus maybe a half hour of prep time, maybe a little bit more if you want to take your time. And the overarching setup for that is the cadence, I should say. So at the very beginning of the game, you work with everyone else to come up with, okay, what's the main quest that we're going to go on, who's the villain of that quest, and what kind of characters are we going to have. And character creation is really streamlined. You just choose an adjective like bumbling or egotistical, and then you choose a classic archetype. So you're a warrior or a cleric or a bard or something like that. One of my favorite goofiest ones, which was not originally one of the default options, one of the characters played a peasant, but really a family of peasants who were sort of all interchangeable. So it was a bunch of siblings who, through their own incompetence or that of their party, sort of died one after another, and they were kind of just these interchangeable peasants coming in throughout the story. Became a running joke. And so once you get into the game proper, it's a series of scene setting broken up by confessionals. Confessionals like a reality TV show where the camera person pulls you aside and you just talk directly into the camera. So it's currently set up where you have Act 1 where you're leaving sort of the safe environs and you're just starting to get to know each other as a party. And then there's a break for confessional, and the confessionals are meant to be fairly provoking drama among the party. So I think the question for the first confessional is, how are you feeling about the party and who is the biggest liability? And so everyone then goes through one-on-one and answers that. And then you jump into the next set of scenes during Act 2. And the way scene setting works, so during each act, each player gets to set one scene. So they'll say, oh, I want you and you and you in the scene, and here, we're making camp for the night, and we've been hearing strange, ominous noises to the outside. Go. And then it just plays out for anywhere from 30 seconds to a few minutes. And anyone can then call the scene, although it's the responsibility of the person who created the scene to officially end it. But in practice, anyone can when they feel like it's run its course. So yeah, so you go through these 3 acts. So starting out on an adventure with the group forming, into the wilderness, running in and out of trouble, and then is Act 2, and then Act 3 is gearing up for that final confrontation against the evil foe, the antagonist. And Act 3 stops just short of finding out whether the party succeeds or fails. And then there's a quick mechanic that I'm still workshopping a bit to determine does the party succeed or fail. And so right now the mechanic is every player at the same time puts their hand out and it goes thumbs up if they want to succeed, thumbs up, down if it doesn't. And then the net number of thumbs up or thumbs down determines the outcome, ranging from we succeeded by accident to we made things way worse. And as soon as that's established, then there's a little bit of just filling in the detail on that, and then we go into our final round of confessional, which would be epilogues. So what happened to our characters? What are their plans for the future? If they happen to have died during the climax, which is quite likely, then the bard casts a speak to dead spell so that they can talk about their plans for the afterlife, or how much they rue the day that they joined this party and wish they had just stayed at home. So that's Behind the Magic. It's probably the furthest along, and one of the things I want to do with Patreon is work with my backers to prioritize which games I do first, but this game is so far along, and I'm so excited about it, that unless I hear strongly otherwise, this is my current plan to be the first release, with probably a well visually designed version of it being released sometime early Q1. But I am very excited to share a current draft of it later this week to my Patreon backers. So very, very excited to share it, get your feedback, and then also hopefully so you can play with friends. So that is game number 1 that I've been working on. Game number 2 is called Duetta. Duetta, the design goal for it, and I've been playing around with this design space for a little while, is the idea of having a world that is shared between a bunch of players that you're sort of taking turns setting adventures in it, and the results of those adventures have a lasting impact on the world. So the initial experiment I've done has been basically it's a sort of Italian city-state, like think Renaissance era, so lots of little city-states, lots of concentrated wealth, and just past like medieval era technology. And the frame story is that there's this super tyrannical regime, it's really bad for the people, and there's this shadowy order that in the past, when the city has been in dire straits, has come to rescue the people from unfair rulers. And so once again, it is time for the secretive order to come forward and help save the city. The most important part of this game, in terms of the state of tracking what's going on, takes place. I'm using a tool called Airtable, but you can just do it in Excel if you want. And you're just keeping track of all of the different factions. So in this case, the city-state is ruled by a series of powerful houses. Maybe the best analogy there is like the houses in Game of Thrones. And so they all have these seats on this council. And so as the secretive order, you are going to be working to destabilize these factions, pit them against each other, and the state, so tracking in Excel or an Airtable, you'll be able to see what's the current health of the factions, where are they strong, where are they weak, and in doing so, plot out what your next mission is going to be. And the way it's currently set up, it's for 1 player and 1 GM, and that, again, the idea is that you have a big pool of general players, but when one player decides they want to go on a mission, they say, here's the mission, I'm going to attack this house, and I'm going to do so by creating some sabotage to their main finances. Maybe they own a mining facility, so you're going to destroy the mining facility. And so you said that, and then somebody else says, cool, I'll GM that for you. And this can be happening over the course of weeks, or maybe you all get together in a house and you have a bunch of these dyads, these pairs splitting off and doing adventures. And then you go through your mission, and I'll get into the details of that in a second. And then depending on if it succeeds or fails, you then update the spreadsheet with the results. So the next time somebody goes, the world has been updated. And the way I currently have it done, you're updating the spreadsheet, but you're also sending out short mission recaps to all the other players so they can sort of get caught up with like what's going on in the world. So that's the high level of Duetta. The nuts and bolts of how a given mission works is something I've been experimenting on a little bit. I think I've run 5 different playtests of it so far, and it's not quite where I'd like it to be. The initial mechanic I was playing with was that you were building a dice pool over time based on the successes that you were having as a character during your mission so far, as well as answering several questions like, are you attacking the enemy where they're weak? Do you have a particular asset or ally that you're pulling in to help? And based on that, you build up this dice pool, and then depending on how powerful the faction is, you're going to roll the dice and try and hit a target number. So the stronger the faction, the harder it's going to be to accomplish your goal. And your goal could be to add to make them weaker in specific ways, to make your allies stronger, to try and flip a faction. So I think some of the end game, some of this is also inspired by the Nemesis system from Shadows of Mordor, the video game. But the idea is that you actually start to understand the org chart of the enemy factions, that you have the names of the NPCs, who's actually running it, but also who are their subordinates. And so maybe you're able to like flip the subordinates over to your side and then have a coup within a given faction. And now that faction, that seat on the council, is controlled by you. And when I say you, I mean by the secret order, by all the players. And so this initial mechanic of building up this dice pool and rolling, it worked okay. And the way I had it set up was a basic 3-act structure. So you have 3 critical dice rolls at the end of Act 1, at the end of Act 2, and then at the end of Act 3, where success in Act 1 or Act 2 will make things easier or harder during Act 3. And it's good, but it's a little too fiddly, I think, and things like grind to a halt a little too much when it comes to the end of that act and the resolution. So I'm experimenting with some other mechanics. Right now, I'm noodling with, based on some questions at the very beginning, you put a bunch of stones of 2 colors into a bag, so one for positive outcome, one for negative outcome. And you do that based on the context of the scenario, the difficulty of the mission, and what assets you have to bear, but you do that all before you even start. And then as you go, you're drawing stones out of a bag anytime there's a possible challenge, or you want to find out what happens, and you're playing to get to be the first to have either maybe 5 good things happen or 5 bad things happen, and that determines the overall success of the mission. So I like this drawing the stones out of the bag idea. I haven't seen it implemented much. I know Ben Robbins' Follow uses it in a sort of different way to determine scene outcomes, and I'm excited to use that for the next playtest of Duetta. And Duetta, I don't have the rules fully written up yet. I have some short notes that I've been using that I've shared with other folks who've GM'd it for me. But I am excited to keep messing with some of the mechanics, and I'll share out some of the database stuff probably later this month or early next month. So that's the second game, is Duetta. The third game that is currently bouncing around my mind a bunch, the working title for it is Chaos is a Ladder, and it's a game of intrigue and scheming, probably for just one player and one GM. And Chaos is a Ladder, the phrase Chaos is a Ladder is from Game of Thrones, from the character Littlefinger, who is like everyone's very oft favorite character that's really fun to hate. So if you don't know Game of Thrones, Littlefinger is a schemer, a manipulator who works his way up from like a minor lord in an outlying land to trying to become the king of Westeros, or amass as much power as possible. And so even in the early few seasons, he like parlays success into success to become control of huge sections of land and power in the kingdom. And the way he does that is by sowing a lot of chaos, because he basically says, like, the more chaos there is, the more I can create opportunities for myself. And so I've been trying to create a game, or noodling around a game, that you are looking at sort of the state of the world. So sort of like Duetta, you see what the different houses or factions are, and what their relationships are to each other in this case, because they might not be aligned. And then you have all sorts of mechanics at your disposal to get the factions to fall into war with each other, or to be paranoid or fearful. And the idea is that at any given time, you have one house that's acting as your patron, and you're sort of whispering lies into their ear and making them paranoid, potentially making them paranoid because you're creating the exact threat that you're warning them against. And that the more afraid they are, then when you step up and save the day, the more they're going to reward you. And depending on the shape of the world or the state of the world at the time, what you might be trying to do is create a big threat so that you can thwart it and then get promoted from lord to baron to duke. Or it could be that you are setting your current patron up for failure so that you can switch sides and hand some other faction in the kingdom on a platter, so that they're going to then give you that promotion. So still early stages of game design. I've playtested it once. The initial playtest was interesting. I learned a ton. It was definitely flawed for what it was. It was also one of those weird playtests because it was supposed to be 1 player, 1 GM, and then I ended up having 3 players all co-run the Littlefinger character. And that may have influenced things a little bit, but what I learned was right now it sat in that sort of valley between emphasis heavily on the narrative and emphasis heavily on the mechanics, something that could even just be a board game. And so because it was sort of this blend, it was down here, it kind of suffered from not being heavy to one way or the other. Although I did get amazing feedback. People loved the way I was tracking the state of the world, and they loved hatching these schemes and living in this world and thinking about these schemes. It was just a little too mechanical heavy, not narrative enough, I think, for the direction I want to take this in. I mean, it could also go the board game direction, but that doesn't interest me as a designer at the moment. I want to do the storytelling games. And so I'm really excited to do another rev on the rules and keep pushing this game forward. And I think the idea is that it's probably a game that 2 people can play out in an hour or 2, maybe even just an hour. I'll play around to see what feels right. Or it's also probably one of those things that's elastic, where you can get a satisfying overall character arc, world arc in just 1 play session. Or if you want to turn it into a campaign, it won't take too much tweaking. You just luxuriate in the pace a little bit more. So that one's really fun. I'm excited for the next rev on that. And then the final game I'll share with you is a game that I have some notes on. I haven't playtested yet. The working title for it is Under Observation, but the key inspiration there is chain letters or chain mail, and the idea that somebody is starting to write something or video something, and they hand it off to someone else who continues it, and then it keeps getting handed off down the line, always being added to. And the way this would work, I have a few ideas of where this might work, but the initial thought is possibly through YouTube videos, and I think the frame story of it is a handful of ideas I'm thinking of, but one might be that there are the secret order of like guardians who are watching over our world, whether they're sort of secret society or they're aliens who are occasionally meddling with affairs. And they, at any given time, there's one guardian stationed on Earth. And so the video that you'd be posting as just like a solo monologue to YouTube would be your observation notes, your log for observing Earth. And maybe it's grounded in our world. It could also be something completely fantastical, but your notes grounded in our world of what's happening, and possibly also what's really happening behind the scenes. Like you actually might be the puppeteer who's organizing like behind a lot of the big news stories, but what the news isn't telling you or what nobody really understands. And so for the period of a week or a month or however long, you do a few posts during your stint as the current guardian of Earth or puppeteer of Earth, and then you pass it off to the next person who's coming in. And then they watch your videos up till then, and then they take over, keeping the world consistent in anything that you had established, any conspiracies, any new truths about our world, then stay consistent as the next person takes over as the guardian. And then the idea is that this would all be in one long YouTube channel or playlist, so that anyone can then go by and watch from the beginning. And so I think there's something sort of fun and interesting to this that could be really cool. And I don't see too many games out there that have this sort of YouTube mechanic or interplay between the videos. I highly recommend, if this piques your curiosity, checking out some of Banana Chan's games. She has a really cool, she has a couple cool ones I think that use YouTube, but one where you are a conspiracy theorist that's getting more and more panicked because I think the conspiracy is true. And yeah, I think it's a game that plays out over 12 days maybe, or 9 days. And there are prompts for you for each video for what you're saying, but I think the game is called "They're On to Me," and so that partly inspired me here of like, okay, cool, how do we create some interesting games, but also go beyond just making it single player, but at least have some interesting conversation or dialogue. I think there's some other interesting directions to go also in this, where perhaps you are the leads of different space stations that are far enough away that you can't communicate in real time. You can only communicate through high latency video messages, and maybe it takes months or years between each one because your position's so far out there. And again, you can have a channel of these correspondence between these different players that are all through video format. So that's under observation. That's the fourth game I'm working on. That's probably furthest from development. But what I'm currently thinking, again, I'm totally open to hear from you about feedback. But I want to, gonna get behind the magic out there just because I'm so excited about it and it's so far along, and then really listen to you all about what of those other options is most exciting for me to be working on next, and getting a playtest doc out so that you could be playing and giving feedback to you next. So those are the 4 games. I'm going to do a quick check to see if there are any questions in the live chat feed, and I'm not seeing anything right now. So we're 22 minutes in. I'm gonna call it now for this session, but I'm hopefully gonna do a bunch more of these sessions in the future. And if you're a Patreon backer, then keep an eye out for later this week to see the Behind the Magic rules. And if you're not a backer, then consider becoming a backer. I'm probably gonna release a game only every 3 months, so it's relatively low commitment. And even $1 helps. I deeply appreciate any kind of pledge. And you know what? If that's too much, I understand that also. All my games are free to play online, and it would make me happy just to hear that you are playing, and to hear any feedback. And so I would love to know. So just let me know that you're playing and enjoying the games. Anyhow, thank you for your time tonight, and for your support in general. Take care, and have fun playing games and telling stories. Good night.